ni kijana innocent, anaga ubaya na mtu, ni kijana anakuanga amenyamaza, anaga maneno na mtu. Sasa hapo hiyo kitu iniuma sana, kwa sababu yeye hana ubaya na mtu, aliyekuwa anaenda shughuli zake, na hiyo sio kitu nilikuwa natarajia mimi.
Mtoto wangu alikuwa yuenda kwa M-Pesa kurenew line yake. Alipofika karibu na M-Pesa, kukatokezea jamaa wawili wakasema wasipite, akarudishwa nyuma. Ile njia kama ambayo walikuwa wamefunga. Polisi waliwafuata na nyuma walipakiana polisi wawili, wakamfuata barabarani. Alipofika barabarani wakashuka, aliposhuka akamwambia tumefuata wewe, wakamtia pingu na kuanza kumpiga. Wakarudi naye paka pale karibu na wenzake, akaambiwa alale. Alipoambiwa alale akakataa, akapigwa teke la kifua, akaanguka chini. Alipoanguka akasepetuka, akaomba msamaha, nisameheni basi kama nimewakosea. Akapigwa tena teke la kifua, akaanguka chini tena, wakamkanyaga bega. Walipomkanyaga bega, polisi mmoja akaanza kuwakanyaga mara 3, alafu mwingine akaanza kuwaua.
Katika takwimu zetu tumerekodi watu 58 kuanzia mwaka jana peke yake mpaka mwaka huu ambao wamepotea na wengine wameuawa katika njia isiyoeleweka. Na naweza kusema kwamba hizi kesi zimekuwa nyingi sana, na kwangu mimi ama kama shirika vikao kama hivi sioni kama ni muhimu sana wa kufanywa kutatua tatizo hili.
So just before that gentleman spoke, there were 2 women, mothers actually, who were explaining the circumstances under which they lost their children in what they believe to be extrajudicial killing. So about a week ago, there were demonstrations in Kasarani, Wiki Road in Nairobi. The residents there were insisting that the roads there have to be fixed one way or the other. They absolutely had it. And they went lighting bonfires and just protesting. Unfortunately, in that protest, a 17-year-old boy lost his life. And the residents there largely believe it is extrajudicial killing. As a matter of fact, IPOA is probing that particular incident. And that was not the only one. There's another young man as well who lost his life in Majengo. And that has revived the conversation that we've always had as a country about the issue of extrajudicial killing. I remember at some point the DPP, Nordin Haji, went to Mombasa and he had a conversation with residents there because they've always been up in arms about the issue of extrajudicial killing, specifically in the coastal region. And he said this is unacceptable because then this erodes the public trust in the police. So how exactly did we get here again? And is there hope really in terms of fixing or being able to address the issue of extrajudicial killing in Kenya? That is a conversation we're having this evening. In a couple of minutes, I'll be speaking to Peter Kiama. He's the Executive Director at IMLU, otherwise known as Independent Medical Legal Unit. And we'll also be speaking to George Msamali, who is a security consultant. He'll be joining us from our city center studio. But right now, I want us to cross over to Sophia Wanuna, who is speaking to a lady from IPOA. And I did mention that IPOA says they will probe these 2 killings, one in Majengo and one in Wiki. But there are those who say IPOA is toothless because at the end of the day, they say we'll get into investigations and probe this. And then after they probe, what next? Do they have enough powers, really? Can we get to the bottom of this? Sophia, good evening.
A very good evening, Linda. So the Kenya Police Service came into the spotlight last week following those demonstrations in Kasarani. The Kasarani-Mwiki Road has been in bad shape for a long time, and residents had taken to the streets to protest, demanding that the same be repaired. This had even interrupted transport services in that area. 4-day demonstrations were witnessed there that also saw running battles with the authorities. Unfortunately, very sad, the same led to the death of at least 2 Kenyans, is what has been confirmed so far. And of course, others were injured in the same. And so extrajudicial killings is what has come into focus. Why did these people have to die? Why were live bullets being used in quelling these demonstrations? Are investigations and what accountability has taken place since these murders? And of course, those who are injured as well. I have with me this evening Doreen Muthaura. She is a commissioner with the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, to speak more about this. Remember, this is the authority whose mandate is to oversight the police service, to hold them to account. So very much that is squarely on their mandate in terms of their office and what it is they are supposed to do. So, Madam Muthaura, thank you for making time for the big story this evening. Let's begin with what you have been able to establish so far, because Kenyans saw the running battles, the protests, they saw the police come in. The next thing is tears, cries, and sadly the death of Kenyans owing to these demonstrations. What can you tell us happened during those 4 days?
Okay, thank you, Sophie. IPOA is seized of these matters, both from the social media, from general what the media has been able to capture, and also witnesses have come to the authority to complain about what happened. We as Kenyans, we are sensitive about this. We have taken note and we're investigating. Actually, investigations are at a very advanced stage. What we are currently yet to obtain are the statements of a few witnesses. You know, every case that we have at IPOA has to be watertight in terms of investigation, impartial and independent, so that we're able to get the people who are involved and taken to court for action, if need be, to court, and if also need be, for administrative and disciplinary action to be taken. On these two particular issues, we have even participated in the postmortem exercise that was conducted. One, especially the case for Santon, and also those cases that happened in Majengo, where Ahmed Majid was involved. And also thereafter, we had the issue of Mumo, Destiny Mumo, a minor, and Barasa, who happened to be a 27-year-old who succumbed to the injuries. We have, first and foremost, we have to establish whether we have the mandate to investigate, which we did. Where the police is involved, IPOA must come into play. We also have to realize as IPOA, why were we created? Why was it found necessary under the Constitution that Article 244 is enshrined there for purposes of ensuring that the continued discussion of reforms of police officer and holding the police officers accountable to the members of the public. That is why we are independent, and we are supposed to hold them accountable. On that matter, Sophia, I must assure you that we're on top of it, and we shall ensure that justice is done for those poor souls that, innocent Kenyans that lost their life during that kind of demonstration.
Have there been any arrests made so far of the officers? Because in one of the incidents, there's footage of the police officers, the confrontation, the same was captured. I wonder if IPOA is considering that as evidence. Have these officers been arrested, or are they still going about their duties, perhaps, is what some Kenyans would ask this evening?
Great. Now, with regard to what action we have taken, when we identify a police officer as a suspect, like it is in this case, we are obligated by law to notify the National Police Service Commission, who happens to be the institution, the Chapter 15 Commission, that is obligated by law, by the Constitution, to take disciplinary action and disciplinary control on members of the National Police Service. We have done that communication, and we are hoping that action will be done. One, so that we protect the witnesses who are key to this investigation, and so that we can have investigation that is not interfered with in any way. So we are keen on that particular matter. That is what we have done with regard to securing, rather ensuring there is action beyond just investigation. Now, remember also, police officers they enjoy certain rights under the Constitution. Their right to employment and other rights under the Constitution are protected as well, so they cannot be condemned and hurt. So proper investigation must be committed or conducted before any action can be taken. That is why we are expediting this particular process. And for the record is that Inspector General and the chairperson of the National Police Service Commission are very keen on participating and cooperating with us in this whole process. In fact, we've had such a cordial relationship in dealing with these matters, and we expect that action should have been taken. For example, the case of JKUAT, it was very clear when the chair of the NPSC said that already the Commission had taken certain action with regard to those officers. We are investigating this particular case as IPOA, and we are again very advanced stage.
Yes. You talk about about cooperation, because I remember at some point that used to be an issue in terms of the institutions. So the police service, especially feeling civilians should not be oversighting the police. So would you say then Kenya has made progress in as far as IPOA in and of itself, with its independence and its mandates, can operate and be able to hold to account the security apparatus to the extent of the National Police Service?
Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges that the inaugural board encountered was the question of cooperation by members of the NPS. When we came on board, our strategy as this board is to ensure that there is that collaboration so that the investigations are fast-tracked. There is availability, for example, of ballistic reports, and turnaround time is improved. So I can say the success that we have managed to obtain up to now is based on the cooperation of the Inspector General and National Police Service Commission with regard to taking action to prevent any interferences with the investigation process and the witnesses. Even access. One thing is that IPOA has now been able to access places that we couldn't access for purposes of carrying out investigations. And again, we don't have to go to court to seek that compliance of our law or enforcement of summons and compliance by the police officers of summons that IPOA has issued. So I think that cooperation is there, and we are hoping that it will be improved further, because, for example, right now, any deaths that occur in police custody by provisions of the NPS Act, the 5th and 6th schedule of the NPS Act requires that the officer in charge of that police station or any commander that is responsible at that particular moment should be able to notify IPOA within 24 hours. That issue of notification within 24 hours of deaths that have occurred in police custody hasn't been 100% complied to. And we, as IPOA, do not want to go to court to seek that kind of compliance. So we are still engaging the NPS with regard to that. Yeah. Again, it's important, Sophie, to appreciate this Article 244 on professionalization of the service. You did indicate the question of force and service. It's a process that we must work towards. All of us, all the institutions involved in the criminal justice system, and more so on matters of policing, should agree and work together so that we are able to pick out those officers who are not complying to the law and also the standing orders. And again, it's in the interest of both the service and the general public, even the president of this country, that the officers act in a certain manner as required by law. Yeah. Yes.
You touch on that because for many Kenyans, they still refer to the National Police Service as the Kenya Police Force. That there's yet to be that paradigm shift when the name changed to the Kenya Police Service, that there still is a significant number in there that do not approach work as service, but it's more force, the brutality, the extrajudicial killings, the excessive force that is witnessed time and again. So as IPOA, how is it you're engaging to make sure, outside of just holding them to account, there's engagement of deterrence so that there's that clear shift, but also those that are found culpable, can you share with us numbers? Have there been convictions? Because this continues happening, but since you came into office, what can you speak of as these are the police officers who broke the law and have been indicted?
Great. Now, there are two issues that you have raised, Sophie. One is, what are we doing as IPOA to initiate, or not to initiate, rather, to support the discussion on police reforms, because that's actually it. It is from a force to a service that is people responsive, that is serving the people. One, as IPOA, we are also engaged in training. A lot of training, because we realized if the new recruits that are coming into the service do not come with the knowledge of compliance with the law, the necessity to hold the public in this manner and so on, then eventually we will have the same order going on. So we've been training both the junior officers and the senior officers, the commanders and also the junior officers, so that we have this continued discussion. We tell them what is your responsibility as a police officer and what is the responsibility of a Kenyan when they come to you. We've been informing the police officers that when you're caught on the wrong side of the law, you will take individual responsibility for any mistake or any offense that you commit as an individual, whether you're getting orders from whichever quarter, whether it's from your commander and so on. And also the commanders and the senior police officers, and then this provision is even in the National Police Service Act. The commanding officer who gives wrongful instruction or instructions that are unlawful will take a personal responsibility, and any officer who obeys, again, an unlawful order, will take personal responsibility, and we have a conviction with regard to that particular matter. So what is the discussion here? That's why we're saying Article 244 that talks about changing the service, professionalizing the service and holding them accountable is progressive. And also the members of the public have an obligation. We have an obligation. One, as an institution, we are constrained in terms of resources, so we are not able to reach out to every Kenyan, one, to inform them what is their responsibility. But with this era of technology, we are able to get feedback, quick feedback from the public, where they're capturing these videos on live and sharing with us and so on. So I think it's a discussion that all institutions, we must all join hands in trying to professionalize the police, from the training to where they are accommodated. Look at the housing right now, they're integrated with the society. This was a recommendation partly from IPOA. We thought this is how we can have our police officers feeling that we are one and we are able to work together. We're also condemning as IPOA where the members of the public take the law into their own hands. Most of the time the police react based on how the public have conducted themselves during either demonstration or whatever. Now, what we are saying is that let's be law-abiding citizens to a certain extent. And when the officers engage in anything that is beyond their powers enshrined by the Constitution and the law, then they should be able to report to us and we shall investigate, and that we shall do without fear or favor. And now, the second leap of the question...
about the convictions, the numbers.
Oh, yes. That you'll allow me to quickly...
Yes, you can definitely reference, but very briefly. Yes.
We have so far received 13,618 in total complaints. Some are very administrative, and as you know, under Section 87 of the MPS Act, there is an institution that has been created there to deal with internal complaints, internal issues that are not... Of advanced and severe nature. The Internal Affairs Unit is able to handle that, and therefore we have recommended 826 cases. These cases, we've not left them at that point. We hold monthly meeting with the team held by Charlton Morethi. We are able to check the status, what action has been taken or what recommendation has been made, and we can recall the file from the AIU at any stage where we think justice had been delayed. Now, we also have 5,629 cases at IPOA, very advanced. These are cases that are either we have forwarded to DPP, others we have recommended that an NPSC take certain action, and then we have also done a lot of monitoring and inspections in 668 police stations and police posts and facilities, so that's in total. And then we have forwarded for action to the Inspector General 1,254 cases, and we hope that the Inspector General has taken action. We have a follow-up onto this, by the way, on the action that has been taken. Some have been interdicted, some have been recommended to NPSC for further, and even recommended for training and so on, so that we improve, because it's not about just punishing, but ensuring that the service also is improved for purposes of, service delivery and so on. We have also recommended 101 cases to the DPP, and we are following some, and the IPOA is actually watching brief in most of the cases that we have already been tabled in, or rather filed, and charges have been preferred in court. There are those that administrative action has been recommended. For example, EACC, those that we've recommended to EACC, there are those that we've recommended to CAJ and many, many other institutions. So there are quite a number. Action has been taken. Nothing is just, we are taking really.
So we have 1 minute before we wrap up. Speak to me briefly. The political temperature and climate is heating up. And some instances you find that officers will provide security, or rather get caught up in as far as being seen to provide security for some meetings, and in others, when they are opposed or the powers that be do not want certain meetings to take place, then you're seeing them being dispersed with tear gas and it becomes violent scenes. I wonder whether IPOA you as a commissioner would comment on that, on how the approach to those kind of instances should be. Briefly.
Sophie, briefly, again, this matters. I don't know whether they are political or not. If a police officer is in any way violating the law or is in any way complying to unlawful order, as IPOA have stated, it's provided for in the NPS law, we will deal with that officer as a person, investigate that person, investigate the senior commander who gave the unlawful order and the officer also who has complied to that unlawful order. It's unfortunate if that is the situation, but as IPOA, we are monitoring all of them, regardless of the political environment. And this is just to advocate and communicate, rather pass the message to our officers. Please, let's maintain fairness, impartiality in the entire process, whether it is in politics, whether it's general demonstration, whether it's in the course of your duties. I think it's important that all officers comply to the rule of law and of course, comply and live into the spirit of the Constitution that established all of us.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Doreen Mudaura is a commissioner with the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, and her parting shot there is about the rule of law that's been upheld across the board with fairness. And Linda, it's important to note that in instances where the police use force, there are instances where the law does allow, and that's clearly spelt out. However, in instances when that has taken place and it's outside the law, those are the cases that we see IPOA pursuing, saying that they are following up on the various instances. Linda.
There are instances where the law actually allows them, but let me just be specific. We're talking about extrajudicial killing this evening, and when you look at it, this is the killing of a person by governmental authorities or individuals without the sanction of any judicial proceeding or legal process. Extrajudicial killings often target leading political, trade union, dissident, religious, and social figures. So from that description, do you get the feeling that perhaps we have been witnessing a number of extrajudicial killings in the country, and if we have, what is the way forward? And I like what Mudaura said, that members of the public have to be involved in this entire process in the first place, and she also just identified some of the progress they have made. And while we're at it, let's go back to the members of public and the role that they play, because there are those who seem to think that we've gotten ourselves to where we are, because there's a history to this extrajudicial killing. It didn't start yesterday, it didn't start last year. It has been there, and it's how we as Kenyans have been dealing with it that has resulted to what we are seeing right now. That's where I want to bring in George Msamali, who's a security analyst, and Peter Kiama as well, Executive Director, Independent Medical Legal Unit. Msamali, let me begin with you. There's a history. This started at some point. This started from somewhere. So how did you get ourselves here to a point where, and I was having a conversation with you during the day, you're saying, we'll make noise for 2 days. After 3-4 days, we'll keep quiet. We'll wait for another extrajudicial killing. Then we'll make noise again. And then that's it. So how did you get here?
I think, Linda, we will not get down to the bottom of this unless we look at history. Extrajudicial killings have been with us for quite some time, and it's only that right now there's a lot of media attention, there's a lot of public awareness. This is why now we are shouting and say that police are involved in extrajudicial killings. But let's look at where the rain started beating us. I think in the early 70s, during the government of President Jomo Kenyatta, we had a lot of bank robberies, and the president issued a decree that any bank robber should be shot on sight. And this is when now we had people like a police reservist, infamous, I will not call him famous, Patrick Shaw, took it upon himself to be carrying out these kind of assassinations and killings. I can give examples of Nicodemus Arudhi, who was shot in cold blood by Patrick Shaw. We can give an example of Wakinyonga, who was killed in Kangemi by the same police reservist. And during that time, Kenyans were celebrating this. We were looking at Patrick Shaw as superhuman. We were looking at Patrick Shaw as a super cop. And slowly, we started cultivating that culture of extrajudicial killings by our security agencies. Come into the 90s, we created another outfit, a special unit, which we codenamed the Flying Squad. And the Flying Squad, all members of the public will know that they were involved in a lot of killings. For example, this is the team that gunned down Washosho. We had Rasta and also Wanugu. And you'll find that during that time, you will find that most Kenyans believed that that is the way to deal with armed robbers, and that is the way to deal with carjackers, and that is the way to deal with runaway armed robberies in the country. And we looked at these police officers as people were performing their duties, and we looked at them as heroes. And slowly, these police officers became uncontrollable, they became unmanageable, they became a law unto themselves. And from insider knowledge, they were only taking orders from one point. That time we used to call him the Commissioner of Police. And they started becoming rogue. And this is now the history that we are facing, and this is now the monster that we are facing, in
so
that police officers believe that the only way to deal with armed robberies is extrajudicial killings.
Okay. Kiama, just listening into Doreen Muthama, and she was saying the public has a lot of say in this. We have a lot of roles. There's a huge role that the public needs to play in all this. And someone was saying, if the public would react somehow differently to extrajudicial killing and put some emphasis on it, then maybe we wouldn't be here. Because in some instances, someone would say we have sort of, quote unquote, normalized extrajudicial killing in this sense, that you'll get people being victims of extrajudicial killing. And like I said, people will make noise for 2 or 3 days and then it's quiet. IPOA will go and do the investigations, hand the report to the police, nothing happens, and it's fine. So what is the role of the public in all this, even as we look at what happened last week? Because the public must have a big role in all this.
Thank you, Linda, and thanks, Musamali and the board member from IPOA for articulating the issues quite clearly. I do agree with Musamali about the history, that the issue of extrajudicial killings have some historical perspectives to it, including public acceptance of that particular trend by the police. If the public were able to denounce these incidences very, very loudly, then we would have, we would have won the war to an extent. The difficulty is that the public mainly have become cheerleaders of the police who are involved in extrajudicial killings. The fact that this evening we are discussing extrajudicial killings in Kenya is itself a very sad thing, because it should not be the norm. The killings by police officers should not be the way to enforce the law in this country, and therefore it's a big concern that we are discussing this, almost 10 years after the promulgation of the new constitution. We should have a completely different picture by now. I hear Doreen saying that police transformation is a process. Yes, it's a process, but the fact that between 2013 and now, we have an average of about 100 young people killed by the police every year is a big concern. We are not at war with the police, neither are the police at war with the public. And the fact that that interaction has led to about 100 cases per year is a big concern for us. And therefore the starting point should be that our society, all of us, should say a big no, say that extrajudicial executions, police killings are totally unacceptable. When I say that, I do agree that the law allows the police, gives the police the powers to use lethal force only when necessary and as a last resort. However, the trend we are seeing it does not reflect the legal provision. We are seeing cases where police officers are killing young people in demonstrations, young people in poor neighborhoods in this country, not as a last resort, but as the first option when they come into contact with either criminal suspects or when they are involved in patrols, especially in the poor neighborhoods of Nairobi and other towns.
You basically said we are seeing police using force and using bullets not as a last resort but as a first reaction. Would it make sense, Mr. Kiama, if even as we see these killings and the report is out from different bodies, would it make sense for you if the police were to come out with the report and say, guys, these are the people who died in this incident, this is what's currently going on? And in saying this, I'm pointing at the Internal Affairs Office of the police. Would it make sense, or would it make it better if they were forthright with information in all this? Then maybe we can start having a conversation with all stakeholders.
That's the point, and that's the legal, the legal provisions that allow the police to subject themselves to a very objective accountability process. For example, the National Police Service Act obliges the police to report every case of interaction with the public where an injury has happened or a death has happened. Now, that in many cases is not happening. Those reports are not ending up at IPOA. IPOA has to do a lot of work to be able to get those reports coming through to them so that they're able to investigate. Every case where a discharge of bullet happens is supposed to be reported within the National Police Service mechanisms. That is not happening in many cases. And that's the challenge. So the biggest problem we have is, and let me say this before I make that point, in that the Inspector General has pronounced himself very clearly that he will not accept police officers getting involved in extrajudicial executions, and that he'll hold them to account. However, there's a big question as to why these cases are continuing. Is it that the commanders at lower levels have not taken up this message clearly, so that then they're able to give clear instructions to the junior officers not to get involved in extrajudicial executions? That's the question, I think, before us this evening. Is it that the instructions by the Inspector General are not being carried out at those lower levels? Number two is the fact that the cases are continuing means that the accountability mechanisms we have set up have failed. Whether it is the role of IPOA, who are trying their best to hold the police to account, whether it is the role of the Internal Affairs Unit within the National Police Service, whether it is the Office of the DPP, or whether it's the judiciary, whether it is the National Police Service Commission. We have given ourselves quite a number of institutions and mechanisms to ensure that extrajudicial executions do not continue. The question is it that these mechanisms are not working for us?
Mr. Mali, is it that these mechanisms are not working? What exactly is going on? Is there a disconnect between the top leadership and the middle and the lower level? Where exactly is the problem? And as you answer that, Kiam alluded to the fact that IPOA is trying as much as they can. And those who seem to think that IPOA is a quote-unquote toothless authority, because after they do the investigation, they're handing their report to the police, then what next?
I think, Linda, the elephant in the house here is that the extrajudicial killings have become an acceptable culture, both in the service, and it has also become acceptable within members of the public. And this is our undoing, because if we look at past histories, we've had groups like Mungiki, we've had people being killed, we've had groups like the Gaza in Kayole, and you'll find that these young men are being killed by the police. But you'll find that it has become acceptable to the members of the public. The families will take their dead, go bury them, and life continues. We don't make enough noise, and nobody thinks that what we are doing is, we are now using a quick, simple, and long solution to a long-term problem. And this is not working for us. And if you look very closely, the kind of investigations that we've seen being carried out by IPOA, very few police officers that have been accused of extrajudicial killings have been held to account. It means you do an extrajudicial killing, the members of the public will shout for 2 days, not even the members of the public, the civil society will be out on the streets for 2 days, and then thereafter, nothing happens. So the police know there are no consequences. The police officers that we've seen being charged in court were not involved in extrajudicial killings. Let's take an example of the OCS who was convicted from Ruaraka. A prisoner died in the police cells. But we've not seen directly a police officer being arrested and accused of extrajudicial killing and then arraigned in court and due process is followed. There is a case in Isili that we all witnessed where 2 young men were shot in cold blood before members of the public, and all this video went viral. The former Inspector General of Police, Mr. Boynet, promised action, and to date, nothing has happened. So there are no consequences. And it's like it has become acceptable for us to use extrajudicial killings as a way of fighting violent crime. And I think this is not working for us. If you look at the way IPOA is carrying out its investigations, they don't have authority to implement their recommendations. So you are accusing the police of extrajudicial killings, and once IPOA has done its report, they have done their investigations, they have come up with the recommendations, they take these recommendations to the same National Police Service to execute or to implement. So what happens? These files are gathering dust in the shelves. and no action is being taken. And the culture is continuing. So it has come to a point whereby we need to take decisive action on how to end extrajudicial killings. I heard about justifiable. We are saying that at some point we are told that the police are allowed to use force. We are told there are justifiable instances when a police officer is supposed to use his firearm. And we are told that you use necessary force. We can't quantify the necessary force, but the circumstances have to be investigated.
Okay.
Let us look at the Kamukunji case. This young man was shot on the street.
Somebody, hold on. I'm sorry for interjecting. Hold on. I'm sorry for interjecting. I need to take our fast break, but I hear you. You're saying, basically, IPOA does its work. So we're looking at that chain. So IPOA is out. They've done their work. It ends at the internal affairs desk of the police. What next? Perhaps that is where the conversation needs to start as we talk about the decisive action that you're talking about. But even as we have this conversation, it's interesting that on Twitter, there's a hashtag, Rashid the Rogue Cop, has been trending the whole day. And that should worry anyone who has the goodwill and the good interest of the police and indeed security apparatus in the country. You may want to look it up. We're taking a short break on the big story.